We galloped, the ground beneath us increasingly muddy and treacherous, until we were forced to stop by a raging, frothy river. The muddy, rushing water was tearing away at the banks on each side. I could see the black shapes of uprooted dead trees as they were carried away. Just beyond the other side rose a cliff face. Water was pouring down the cracks of the cliff into hundreds of rivulets, each feeding into the river at the bottom. Across from us, just a little way up the cliff, was a dark mouth of a cave, the path up to it already washed away. I stood there, staring helplessly, trying to figure out how we were going to get across. Then I felt myself being lifted into the air as Calamity flew us over the river and sent me down in the mouth of the cave, feeling stupid. I stepped further in, shining the lamp of my pit-buck into the cave. The path continued up about a yard, then took a steep decline with frightfully old metal stairs, rusted nearly black, leading to a concrete landing. Once at the landing, the rough walls were replaced by stonework. At the end, a very familiar-looking steel door hung open on its hinge arm. The number 24 was emblazoned on the center of the door. Beyond lay a rusted, ruined doppelganger of the place I had once believed would forever be my home. Calamity rushed past me. "Don't just stand there gawking. Help me get this door shut before that darn river spills its banks completely and floods this hole." He was trying to push the door physically. I looked down, noticing for the first time that the floor of the cave was a noticeable puddle, 2 inches deep and growing. Moved into action, I rushed to the controls. I paused long enough to check the bolting mechanism, which was actually entirely missing, and making sure I'd be able to open it again. Satisfied I could, I tried to push up the lever. It didn't want to go. Focusing, my horn glowing brightly, I added my telekinetic strength to that of my hooves. With a loud grinding sound, the lever moved. With a wheeze, the lever arm moved, and the door to stable 24 slammed shut, groaning in protest. "You realize we just shut ourselves in the evil, scary stable of spookiness, right?" I teased my self-invited companion as he stared about the place in wonder. I'm trusting you're right about what you said earlier. Reckon if any pony knows better, 'twould be you." He shot me a nervous smile. "Besides," he added, flapping his wings, "not like these are gonna do me any good down here, one way or another." My eyes caught the harness Calamity wore. The Pegasus had 2 twin long-range rifles, one strapped to each side of his body, right under his wings, built into a saddle mechanism. Thin metal reins reached out in front of him, ending in a bit that hovered a few inches below his mouth. By biting on it, the sibling barrels would fire at once. The saddle was designed to reload on command, possibly triggered by pulling of the bit, or biting differently. I couldn't tell. "Hey, Calamity, I've been meaning to ask you, what is that?" I pointed a hoof at the contraption. "What?" He turned, looking around, spinning in place. I couldn't suppress a laugh. He stopped, looking at me, then back behind him again, once more before. "What, you mean my battle saddle?" I nodded. "Fine piece of work, ain't it? Designed it myself." He reared up, showing it off proudly. Then, at my expression, asked, "You mean to tell me you ain't never seen a battle saddle before?" I shook my head. "Well, ain't that a thing?" He strutted about. "There's basically 2 types of firearms, loosely speaking. There's the small ones that a pony can stick in his mouth and levitate around if he's a unicorn. Then there's battle saddles, for all the firearms that are just too big and heavy and have too much kick to be wielded without support. I've seen all kinds of weapons built into battle saddles. Machine guns, rocket launchers." "Rocket launchers?" My tail drooped, and ears fell back at the thought. "Yep, even magical energy weapons." He paused. "Though those are damn scarce, so you're not likely to ever see 'em yourself." I filed that away for future reference. After checking my pit-buck for radiation or similar dangers, and EFS for any glows of hostility, I took a long gulp from my canteen and began plotting our course. I was confident from my lifetime in a stable that I could navigate this one with no problems. If the layout was the same, the door to the right in the next room should lead to the stairs headed downward. That would be the cafeteria, living quarters, school, and clinic. To the left, a corridor leading deeper into maintenance, including the ever-familiar pit-buck technician maintenance stall. Without a second thought, I decided we would go right first. Calamity, meanwhile, had scouted all the immediate adjacent rooms. He came back with a mildly surprised look. "They got a box of dynamite in the storage room over yonder." Okay, that was a bit surprising. I felt my ears stick up. You weren't going to find that in the stable, too. What was in it? "Dynamite, I reckon," Calamity said, mock scholarly. "In truth, I don't know for sure. It was locked, and I wasn't about to go shaking it like a birthday present trying to figure it out, on the chance it might be full of, dynamite." I followed the rust-colored Pegasus back to the storage room to check it out, but after 3 tries and the loss of 2 more bobby pins, which I was beginning to run alarmingly low on, I had to admit the lock was beyond even my self-proclaimed expertise. Instead, I suggested we move along the path I had originally planned. The door to the living quarters slid open with a reassuring hiss. The lights gave off a familiar whine, those that still worked. Already, Stable 24 was making me horribly homesick. Worse, the dull ache in my heart mixed with disconcerting sense of wrongness. Seeing this place in rust and ruins was unpleasant in a way that I couldn't begin to describe. It was like walking through my own personalized version of the post-apocalypse. I was finding doors that wouldn't open. The floor was strewn with tin cans and litter. The generators, uncared for, were making an odd rhythmic churning. And from deeper within came chugging, banging, and hissing sounds that had no place in a stable at all. This was a demoralizing, eerie, spooky house version of Stable 2. I turned to look back at Calamity and caught him picking up bottle caps off the floor. I bit my lip, bracing against a wave of emotion that shrieked as he was desecrating the place. Looting and scavenging was survival in the equestrian wasteland. And logically, that applied to here too. But, even more than stripping goods off fresh corpses, this felt like grave robbing. Unholy. My feelings scattered as overhead a burst of thunder hit so close to the cave that we could hear it inside the stable. My heart thumped in my chest. "What the hell?" I stammered, waving my fire hose to indicate the sky outside. "Told you. Thunderstorm." "This isn't like any thunderstorm I've read about in my textbooks," I countered. Calamity looked at me with a soft, mocking expression. "Weather ain't like it used to be. Sun and the moon ain't guided through the sky by ponies anymore. We Pegasus. The goddess Celestia and Luna move the sun and the moon through the sky each and every day," I shot back, scandalized. How could he even say that? That was like blasphemy. "Oh, yeah." He rolled his eyes at me. Rolled his eyes. "From their place in pony heaven. Right." I bristled. He stared quietly until I gave in, motioning for him to continue. "As I was saying, the Pegasus ain't around scheduling the weather neither. Equestria's weather's gone wild." I felt a chill down my mane. Through the metal walls in the mountain, we felt the percussion of the storm. I had begun to wonder how over-engineered Stable 2 must have been for me never to have heard storms like these. Obviously, it was designed to stay closed longer, which I was figuring probably accounted for the architectural differences I had started to notice. "Huh," I thought out loud. "There's only one section for bathrooms. At least, only one in the living quarters section of the stable. Back in Stable 2, there were 2. One for mares, one for stallions. The floor outside was wet, and I could hear a roar of gurgling, splashing sounds from behind the bathroom door. Also, unlike Stable 2, Stable 24 was connected to the aquifer, its water supply merely purified with antitoxin and anti-radiation spells. With the downpour outside, every sink and toilet was backing up. The same went for the water fountains. The one between the school and the living quarters was spraying brown water. The horrible noises were coming from the pipes and plumbing rather than unnatural monsters. I stopped dead as a red spot flashed up on the compass of my EFS. Somewhere, just ahead of us, was surely one of the creatures Crane had talked about. Not, I realized, that either of us had bothered to get a description. So, any idea exactly what sort of varmints we're supposed to be looking for down here? I whispered as we both crouched down, moving as steadily as possible. Well, bathrooms weren't segregated. Sleeping areas were. The main floor were for stallions, and a lower one for mares. That, too, was different than Stable 2, where the quarters were geared towards families. My EFS felt annoyingly limited, unable to tell me which level the creature was on. Just that it was almost dead ahead now. I levitated out little Macintosh, ready as I could be. Actually, no, Calamity whispered back. And as I recall, we ain't supposed to be looking for him. We're supposed to just close the door. As I recall, I retorted, maybe a slight bit less quietly than I should have, I'm supposed to be closing the door. You aren't supposed to be anywhere. I couldn't deny that he had a point. In fact, if trapped inside a creature's lair, poking around is probably the dumbest thing a pony could possibly do. The other hoof, this was another stable. My curiosity and sense of connection wouldn't allow me to leave it unexplored. And if I was trapped in here for a few hours, well, no time like the present. Calamity shook his head, but followed all the same. We moved a few steps closer, and the red spot winked out. I turned quickly, trying to see if it had somehow gotten behind us, but there was nothing. Either the creature had evaporated, or we were right on top of it, one floor up. We crouched there, keeping still and quiet. After a moment, the red spot appeared again, once more right in front of us. After a few seconds later, it vanished once more. This time, apparently, for good. Aside from age and deterioration, the school in Stable 24 looked exactly like the one back home. Students' tables, all in nice little rows. A sharing area with toys, the teacher's desk with a terminal, pencils, and even a long rotted apple. The only real difference was a large glass tank, which would have once been an aquarium. Even with rusted walls, this felt like home. It should have been comforting. Instead, it was unpleasantly weird. It was putting me on edge. The constant banging and screaming of the pipes was adding to my discomfort, giving me a mild headache for good measure. Worst of all, we had encountered 3 more ghosts, hostile entities that appeared on my eyes forward sparkle, but nowhere else. A matter not helped at all by the fact that Calamity had no pit buck of his own, so he couldn't tell what I was reacting to. I was beginning to worry that my eyes forward sparkle, or even my pit buck itself, had been damaged or warped by exposure to the equestrian wasteland. Unlikely, I reassured myself, remembering that they were made to withstand much worse than this. What was more likely, and less comforting, was that the creatures down here had magic of their own. You ever heard of any pony named Prince Celeste? What? I trotted over, furrowing a brow. Let me see that, I said, snatching the book from the desk in front of him with a glow of telekinesis. I read a few sentences, then slammed the book shut to look at the cover. It was a children's storybook. The Stallion in the Moon? Calamity chuckled. You know, I think I remember my ma reading me a story like that. Only it was a mare in the moon, if I recollect. That's because it's supposed to be the mare in the moon. Quickly, I began looking through the other books on the desks and school shelves. When I was done, I had reached 2 important feeling observations. 1, every significant pony in every book has been changed into a stallion. Well, I suspect some of them were stallions to begin with. 2, I continue undaunted, even though my voice sounded strained even in my own ears. Not one story or textbook as anything but the vaguest references to the history or governance of Equestria.